Julie was charged and convicted of first-degree child abuse after her 5-week-old nephew suffered injuries consistent with shaken baby syndrome. And after serving more than 4 years of her sentence, Julie appealed her decision. There was a retrial, and she was fully exonerated. Julie won her battle in court, and she continues her fight to end wrongful convictions by telling her story. Take a look.
My sister came to me when she was several weeks into her pregnancy, and she explained that it was an unwanted pregnancy and that she was unable to care for the baby. And she asked if I could assist her, and I told her that I would. I went ahead and I opted to do a formal adoption. And unfortunately, he was hospitalized for a week after his birth. He was in neonatal intensive care because he wasn't eating. Then at 5 weeks of age, he stopped eating and he became lethargic. And by direction of his pediatrician, I took him into the local ER room. And from the local ER room, he was transferred to Children's Hospital, where a day later had to do an emergency brain surgery because there was bleeding in the brain. I wasn't contacted until Monday morning from the sheriff's department. I was quite surprised 20 minutes into the interview when they actually initiated that they were investigating suspected child abuse, that they had suspected that my nephew was a victim of shaken baby syndrome because there was bleeding in the brain, and because I was the primary caretaker, I was the primary suspect. I took my nephew into the ER on Thursday, and now all of a sudden you're coming up with allegations of abuse, and I was bewildered. I was bewildered. They were charging me with first-degree child abuse, and that I had 72 hours to turn myself in. We didn't go to trial for another 2 years because there was a lot of complications. When the trial finally did take place, I was unable to afford a expert witness to testify on my behalf. And after a 4-week trial, the jury came back with a guilty verdict. I spent 4.5 years in prison, but 1 day is too long for anyone who has not committed a crime. Well, immediately I filed for my appeal, and during my whole incarceration, in my mind and in my heart and in my soul, I remember thinking, or knowing, if you will, my nephew was actually a victim of birth trauma. There was several renowned doctors. Separately, independently, they came up with the same diagnosis, that my nephew ultimately suffered a stroke. They were supposed to do an MRI on him when he was in the ER before they sent him down to Children's Hospital, and they overlooked that. So he was actually stroking in the hospital. So my second trial took 4.5 weeks, and after the verdict came back of not guilty, what I have been doing is raising awareness on wrongful convictions. Very often a guest amongst legal students throughout the country. I've been asked several states, when they're opening up innocence projects, please come speak with our students and let them know, what exactly a wrongful conviction is. It's good to put a name to a face. I've done my share of my advocacy, and I'm going to continue to advocate wrongful convictions.
So, here you step in, and then your life gets blown up.
There was no hesitation when my sister came to me and she said, "Listen, this is the situation, and I need some assistance."
Now, your sister has never publicly spoken about this, but she made us a tape today, and we're going to play that now.
Well, back in 2003, I discovered that I was pregnant. The father and I were no longer together, and I was financially struggling, and I decided to adopt him out, but I wanted to keep him in the family. And Julie was always very, very good with children. and her and I were best friends. She agreed, and so we just took it from there. And then I gave birth. It was a difficult labor. There were some complications. He wasn't eating. He wouldn't eat. And they ended up keeping him. They had to put him in the NICU. He was in the NICU for 2 weeks, I believe, and he was on a feeding tube. He did eventually start eating from a bottle. They said that they felt he was well enough to leave the hospital. So we left. Julie took him. She had set up, his nursery and everything in her place. I went to visit him constantly, and everything was going really, really well. And then she had called me because he wasn't legally adopted yet. And she said, there's something wrong with. She said, we got to get him to the emergency room, but I need your consent. You have to sign paper or go with me or something. And she picked me up from work, and he was just gray. He was having a hard time breathing, and I just said, I'm going with you. I didn't care if I got fired. I just told them, I said, I'm leaving. And then they came and they said, we think somebody shook the baby. Like I wasn't even comprehending it fully, I don't think. It was just, my mind was blown because she's perfect, the perfect person to have a child. I mean, it completely destroyed our relationship there because I wouldn't talk to her. I didn't want to see her. I was very, very hurt, very angry, and I just couldn't get over it. It was such a relief that there was scientific proof, and right there, the scans and everything showing that this was a stroke that he had had, and that it had nothing to do with her. I was overjoyed that her name was going to be cleared and that she was going to be getting out of prison. Since 2003, since my sister's conviction, this is my first time speaking out about this, and I'm happy to do this because I want people to know that I support my sister, that I love my sister. She didn't do this. And there are people that are out there that get convicted of things like this that actually are innocent.
Julie, after this incident with this child, was it shocking that the police are looking at you for possibly injuring the child?
The initial accusations, if you will, the medical proof of my nephew's diagnosis had not come out yet. But it wasn't until several years into my incarceration when several other doctors, world-renowned doctors, independently took a look at his medical records, and they collectively came up with the correct diagnosis that he had suffered from a VST, a venous sinus thrombosis, VST, which is a form of childhood stroke. And so unfortunately, he was actually stroking in the hospital when I had taken him into the hospital with my sister.
Do you want to tell your story on the Steve Wilkos Show? Contact the show now at 1-888-STEVE-07. Knowing that you didn't do anything wrong, that you were stepping up to the plate, but now you're facing serious criminal charges. You were convicted or you pled?
No, I was convicted. They did offer me a plea bargain, and I turned it down readily.
And what was your sentence?
I was sentenced to 10 to 15 years.
What would your message be to people watching? Is there anything that you could have done differently? Do you feel, is there anything that you could share to help somebody who might be facing the same situation that you were in?
Just don't stop fighting for your freedom. Don't stop fighting for your freedom. If you're accused of a crime that you know that you didn't commit, just don't stop fighting for your freedom. I mean, after I went through the whole appellate process, I lost all of my appeals, and I recall during that time when I lost my final appeal, and it was like, okay, I didn't give up. I didn't just say, okay, this is it. No, you fight for your freedom. You fight for what you know what is right, and you try to use all the resources that you can.
Well, we're very happy that you were able to clear your name. It seems like you're doing a lot of positive things with your life now that you got out. We wish you all the success and happiness moving forward. Thank you for sharing your story.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I thank you for keeping on this, to continue to raise awareness.
Thanks for being on, Julie. Take care.
God bless.
You
Thank
too.
you.